We're hearing about the number of councils that have applied for this additional rate variation from IPART. We've been told about 70 councils from New South Wales have applied, 21 of them within the Central West and Western Plains district of New South Wales, including Dubbo Regional Council. Can you tell me what that, in your opinion, says about the state of regional councils' financials?
Well, it's not just the state of regional councils. I think it's really an indication that a 0.7% increase in the rates, when we see that obviously CPI inflation is going at a much higher level than that, means that in reality we would have less money as a council, and obviously across all those councils, less money to be able to spend on just providing the normal services that people come to expect. So it was a bit of a surprise, and there was an indication. IPART normally gives some indication for us to allow preparation of budgets on what the rate rise might be, what the rate peg might be each year. And so there was a bit of an indication that it might be up to 2.5%, maybe somewhere around that. So we'd all gone already and prepared our budgets at 2.3%, going, well, it might be 2.5. We're better to prepare a little bit under. So then if it's a little bit higher than that, that's good. We can obviously allow for that. So 0.7%, I don't think anyone at any council across the state was figuring that it was going to be as low as that.
So do you think a lot of councils are in the position that I guess the Dubbo Regional Council is, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to describe it as scrambling, but in a sense going, okay, how are we going to now address that? That wasn't what we were hoping for. Yeah,
that's exactly right. That's the logic for going forward and saying let's go for that slightly higher level that we've been allowed. And it's a very different process this year, which really says to me that it's showing that maybe it was broken. But if we only got the 0.7%, that's about $642,000 less income that we'd receive. Now, this is ratepayer money, so I don't want to be flippant with it. It's still, that money would remain in the pockets of ratepayers across Dubbo Regional Council if we left it at 0.7%. But what I generally hear from people in my last term on council, and certainly in this term again, is not people saying, please reduce the rates. People are asking for things to be built or fixed or make the roads better. They're asking for things to happen, and obviously to do that, you need the money. So that $642,000, if we didn't have that, that would simply be less money we could spend. And typically we'd take it from the roads budget because that's probably the easiest area to take something from or add something to. It just means you can repair fewer roads or basically do less work on the roads or do more work on the roads if you've got more money.
I guess that's something that everybody wants from their council, though, is that, you know, anywhere you go, someone's got a pothole that they want fixed. So that is the kind of area that this money will likely make a difference, is really crucial council services.
Crucial council infrastructure, I think, is the real thing there. And there's certainly a backlog of infrastructure. We could easily spend tens of millions of dollars on repairing a lot of the infrastructure, not just roads, but roads is a big part of that. So to knock back that amount, and then going forward, let's say it was 0.7 this year, and then next year it was up around a more reasonable 2.3, 2.5%, for example. Well, you're only building on a smaller amount. So you're kind of behind the eight ball going forward forevermore. The process has been put in place, and the fact that the Office of Local Government released a circular to say, here are the guidelines for an additional special variation, they're very low-level guidelines in terms of there's not a big bar to jump over to get that special rate variation through the community. Normally, if ever you did go through a special rate variation, and I remember many years ago we did put one in place for our theatre to be able to build our theatre, it was a fairly exhaustive process, and I agree with that exhaustive process. The fact they've made it quite simple to do this time almost says that the government thinks as well that maybe IPART didn't quite get it right.
So, like, what's the idea from here? A lot of councils have had a really tough time through COVID-19 and have borne the brunt of a lot of things. Cancellation of events means that people aren't, hiring council venues and putting some of that money back into council's pockets. So how are councils across New South Wales sitting at the moment after the past 2 years?
There's a range of things there. In our example, think of the airport. The airport, normally we have over 200,000 passengers going through the airport in normal times, in a normal year, and we charge fees for those passengers that go through our airport. And so we actually make some money. Some money gets returned to the community from the airport in normal years. In the last couple of years during COVID, obviously we've had a dramatic drop in the number of people flying. Therefore, we've had to actually take ratepayers' money, community money, and put into the airport to be able to keep it up and operational. Obviously, as we get passengers back, that'll reverse. But certainly, it's put some pressure on the finances of council, but it's probably not so much even put pressures on finance. If a council has been well run during COVID, a council could still stay out of the red, but it just means you need to reduce dramatically the services you provide to the community because you have less money coming in. So you really had to cut the cloth to match the amount of income that you had there. So that's a tough environment. But as we come out of COVID, as we've got the ability for our residents to be able to pay those rates and also for business functions of council to be able to return some money there, it'd be nice to be able to pick up some of those things that haven't been done over that time frame. And just to make it worse, which I know it's going to sound silly what I say in a minute, that we've had rain. Obviously, rain doesn't sound like a worse situation, but rain has put more pressure on the road infrastructure. So as we come out of COVID and there's been good rains, that means we need more money to actually help repair some of those roads that are damaged by rain.
With the special variation process, are you allowed to apply for how much you want that variation to be? What did council put forward, or is there a set number that IPART will come back with?
So it's not actually IPART that will come back with it. Presumably it will be the Office of Local Government that will come back with it. In those guidelines, they said that if you previously had put out a budget, that had an amount that was above the 0.7. So if you put out a budget previously that said, here's what we think the amount will be going up by in those forward projections, then you're allowed to go back and apply for that special variation to that amount. In Dubbo Regional Council's case, there'd been a forward projection of 2.3% that we put in for this year, again below the 2.5% that we thought might be around that figure. So the fact that we had 2.3% in there means that we are now able to apply to have the 0.7 go instead to 2.3%. If you had done forward budgets on 2.5%, you would be allowed to go to that, but no more than 2.5%. So it's almost a bit of a de facto 2.5% rate peg, but only if you had those forward budgets. So if you're a council that hadn't put forward budgets in at 2.3 or 2.5 or any other number, you might have put forward budgets in at the same amount, not knowing what it would be, and then you'd adjust it when that rate pegging amount came out, then you won't be able to apply for it. So it seems a little bit unfair for various councils around the state. And when you mentioned 71 councils, some of those other ones that didn't put an application in may not be putting an application in because they didn't have those forward budgets at a higher amount at 0.7%. So it doesn't seem quite fair for everyone across the board. The other thing that's really interesting about this is that normally the rate pegging amount is set by IPART, but normally people associate that with the state government. In this scenario, it's putting the pressure back on the individual councils to go out and ask the community for that higher amount. So it's almost taking the pressure off IPART, off the state government, and putting it back onto local governments.
What have you had any response from the community about the fact that council put in this application?
No, and it's only just gone out. It went out obviously in our business papers for April, so it's only just gone through a public process at the end of April. So we're not very far into that process, and people obviously can put submissions in and tell us what they think about it. But I think the reality is that the community wants council to have enough money to spend on what they want. So again, we get people every day saying, can you fix the roads? The roads aren't good enough. Well, we need the money to do that is the bottom line for that. So I think people in general are okay with it. Having said that, there are obviously some people, especially after COVID-19, that are in a financial stress situation, and any increase in rates, any increase in what they've got to pay out will be tough for them. But in general, if I just paraphrase across the whole community, I would say that generally people want us to spend more things on items in the community, whatever they may be or look like, depending on where people live and what their particular interests are. But people would love council to have more money.
Is there any idea? I mean, obviously, people have different levels of different rates, but what would that 2.3% maybe boil down to for the average ratepayer in Dubbo?
Well, it is tricky because, and this is the other thing that makes rates very complicated, is that whatever rate rise you have, so whether it's 0.7% or 2.3%, whatever the rate rise is, it's the total rate pool that can go up by that amount. but individual rates could vary. And so, for example, if someone has a different valuation on their unimproved land value, their rates might go up or even go down by a completely different amount to that. But in general, what we've got to do, or what the state government says, is that we can only put the total rate pool up by that amount. So it is hard to say individually.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it sounds complicated.
Who does the maths for that?
but just to make it more complicated than that, the rate pool can grow with new houses, with new ratepayers that come on. So your pool can grow by that amount for existing ratepayers, but new ratepayers can obviously add on to that. So when we have new houses, when we have new businesses come in and the rates pool grows from that, that's a different thing again. So it does make it incredibly complicated.
Okay, so it's a very difficult question to answer. What happens from here? What are the next stages in this process before we find out if this is actually going to go ahead?
So essentially, my understanding is that we had to put applications in before the 29th of April. We had our council meeting on the 28th of April, so we approved that at council to go forward with that, but we still have to have that out in community consultation. So we've got that out at the moment, community consultation, and then that'll come back to a council meeting for us to recognise that consultation with the community. And then, just to make it even trickier, we won't actually get our decision possibly until the 21st of June, keeping in mind that we have to make the final decision on our final budget before the end of June. So, for example, if IPART notify councils by the 21st of June, then we've got to quickly make sure that we've got all those budgets ready to go. In fact, our staff will have two sets of final budgets, one with 0.7, one with 2.3. Then we'll be notified of whether it's been successful or not, and then go forward with that, get it all approved before the end of the financial year, so that on the 1st of July we can actually pay bills.
All right, a very quick turnaround for council staff.